This one will soon.
Your absurd defiance ends here, hatchling.
The appointed time is here. Victory will be.
Probable.
Let you go where that came from. Face your destruction. Burn away sin. Impossible.
Behold, the first daughter of Rayclast.
Hello everyone, this is my Fireball Trap Saboteur using Nimis. This is a character that can front load over 1 billion damage on a boss potentially, as long as you can set your traps before the boss spawns and as long as you know where the boss is going to spawn. I had this idea for a character pretty much as soon as I watched Palsteron's video on KB cast on crit Fireball with Nimis. And while I was watching that video, I was thinking, is cast on crit really the best delivery method for Fireball? And I was looking at different ideas. First I thought, let me try totems. And while I was planning out the build with totems, no matter what I did, even when I had fully spec'd into totems in Path of Building kept telling me that the best thing I could do to up the damage is to use traps. So instead, I did a POB for a Saboteur, and the more I planned out, the more ridiculous it looked, and I've just created this monstrosity. I know some other people have been playing around with the idea of using Fireball with Nimis and maybe some traps with Nimis as well, just to kind of show that I've had this idea for a while. If I type /age on this character, you can see it. This character was created over 2 weeks ago, and its name is Prisma Nimis Traps. This character was created specifically to be a Fireball Trapper with Nimis. So for the tree, it's just a pretty standard trapper tree. You just take all the trap wheels, you take some life where you can, you take reservation nodes, spell suppression, crit. For the actual ascendancy, we take the trapper stuff and we take the defensive stuff. We don't touch any of the mine stuff because we're not using mines. We don't take chain reaction because this isn't a cooldown trap. We don't actually need this. And also, we don't want this because we want all of our traps to be set before the boss spawns. If a trap goes off and sets off all of the traps, then it actually kind of bricks the build. So you don't want chain reaction. I spec'd into an additional curse and Eldritch Battery up here. You could go Devouring Diadem to get Eldritch Battery, but since I was up here anyway to get Whispers of Doom, I figured I was only 3 points away from Eldritch Battery, and that would open up a different helm slot, which I've actually gone back to my idea of using Ilfaben's Trickery, which I mentioned in a previous video. I'm going to talk about this more later. Basically, it's pretty strong. It's probably not the best thing you could put here, but it is pretty strong. And this is even after the nerf that or the bug fix, where the curses no longer get snapshotted on you if you unequip Ilfaben's Trickery. However, there is a way to keep the curses on us as long as we keep the item equipped. And so for that reason, I am using a Self-Flagellation here, and I am stacking all 9 hexes on myself. The gear on this character is obviously pretty expensive. You need Nimis to even get started. This was, I think, a 30 div ring when I bought it. We're also using Ashes of the Stars. This was around 20-25 div, I don't really remember. It's probably gone down by now. Skin of the Lords. This Skin of the Lords was, I think, 8 div at the time I bought it. These tend to go down pretty quickly, though, so probably not that expensive anymore. Using Iron Will on this, that is technically the best keystone for this. It's not really a focus of the build. You could use Eldritch Battery here if you wanted to save a few skill points. You could use Call to Arms. I'm actually using a Sanctified Relic with Call to Arms, so I don't need it. After that, the only real expensive items here, besides gems, are Adziri's Reflection. I'm using this to combo with Ilfaben's Trickery to make sure those hexes that I'm applying to myself don't do anything. And also the increased curse effect that it gives is actually quite a big DPS boost. I'll show that in Path of Building later when I go over that. Other than that, the gear here is not that bad. This Scepter is pretty good. I think the Scepter cost me around 2 or 3 div to buy. I don't really remember. But pretty solid Scepter. The next most expensive thing here is probably the gloves, just because these took an Awakener Orb to make. Awakener's Orbs are pretty cheap now, but if you were to do this earlier in the league, this would be more expensive. The reason it takes an Awakener's Orb is because I wanted Unnerve, and I also wanted Global Crit Chance. Unnerve is a Hunter mod, I believe. Yeah, Hunter mod, and then Global Crit Chance is a Crusader mod. So you take a pair of gloves that has the Unnerve mod and a pair of gloves that has the Global Crit Chance mod. You use an Awakener's Orb on one of them, and then you use it on the other one, and it combines them into one item that have both of those mods, and then random other mods. And the other mods on this are not very good, but I was able to at least craft life on it, so I was happy with that. When you're doing this, just make sure that for the items you're combining, the influence mod that you want, the Unnerve and the Global Crit Chance, make sure that is the only influenced mod on that item. Because if it has two different influenced mods on it, it's random which one will be on the item that gets created by the Awakener's Orb. This Stygian I actually crafted. I think I Essence Slammed this for a while with probably the Strength Essences by the looks of it. Yeah, Strength Essences, and then I just slammed a Warlord's Exalted Orb on it to get the added fire against burning enemies, because this build does ignite, so I can use that added fire against burning. And then I just crafted the increased damage on it. I think this took me 3 attempts to get that added fire damage against burning enemies. I think I created 2 garbage belts with this, and then the third one I hit it. So total, like less than 3 div to make this belt. This Abyss Jewel I think I bought for 1 div. Just a really solid Abyss Jewel. Has damage penetrates, adds fire damage, has life. Pretty much everything I want. These boots are just really basic, just pretty much entirely just defensive stats on these and movement speed. Not even a good movement speed roll, really. And then I've got the crit chance enchant from Lab. This build doesn't actually hit by itself. All of the hits on this build come from traps, so that crit chance is always active because the character never actually deals a crit. But lots of room to upgrade these boots. And then this ring is similar to the belt. It has global crit multi and it has adds fire damage against ignited enemies. I just bought a diamond ring that had the global crit multi on it, and then I Warlord's Exalted Orbed it and got the added fire damage against burning enemies. You're not guaranteed to get that. Again, I created a few garbage rings with this, but it wasn't too expensive to create. I think in total I spent less than 5 div to create this ring. That's pretty much it for the equipable gear. Then there's the flasks, obviously Bottled Faith. And then I'm just using flasks to get damage. These are not the flasks I use while mapping. These are bossing flasks. All of my mapping flasks are down here. So this is strictly damage flasks. We have Bottled Faith, Adziri's Promise, the Wise Oak, Dying Sun, and a Diamond Flask. The Wise Oak, fire resist is my highest, so I'm getting fire penetration from it. And then Cold and Lightning are tied for lowest, which means I'm getting damage reduction against those two. Ideally, you would want all 3 of them to be equal, but since I couldn't quite get that to work out, I just decided, well, I'll just have fire be the highest, that's fine. And since I'm using a Dying Sun anyway, it's pretty much always going to be that fire is higher than them, because Dying Sun is a ruby flask and gives a bunch of fire resist. And then the 2 extra projectiles on Dying Sun are actually extra damage, because Fireball shotguns when it returns from Nimis. That's the whole thing that makes this build work. Any projectile with an explosion component can shotgun. The projectile itself doesn't shotgun, but the explosion can shotgun. And so with Nimis, what happens is the fireballs all go out, and then when they come back in, they all explode on one center point, and they all shotgun on that point. And Diamond Flask, obviously, just for crit. I'm stacking as much crit as possible on this build. Gems is where the build gets really expensive. We have a 21-23 Fireball. I didn't bother with a Val Fireball because it was just too expensive and I didn't really care. That Val Fireball would be strictly for mapping anyway. Awakened GMP, obviously a very expensive gem. Awakened Fire Penetration, actually not very expensive at all. I got really lucky with a Val Orb and I hit level 6 on this, so I was pretty happy about that. This is a gem I actually used on my League starter, so I already had it. Trap and Mind Damage, 21-20. Trap Support, this is only a 20-20. And Empower level 4. The biggest upgrade to this build would be to get an Awakened to power level 5, but those cost about half a mirror right now, so I haven't bothered with that. But just to say that there are still pretty significant upgrades that are still possible to this build, and it's already potentially dealing 1 billion damage on a shotgun to a boss. Over here with Arcanist Brand, Sniper's Mark, Elemental Weakness, Enhance. The reason for this is I can just cast the one Arcanist Brand, it'll cast both of my curses and I won't need to worry about it. The order here matters. Sniper's Mark you want first because you want the projectiles to split as soon as possible. Elemental Weakness you want to cast before the projectiles come back, which is when all the damage is going to be dealt, so you don't need this to cast right away. You want Sniper's Mark right away. The reason I use Elemental Weakness and not Flammability is because with all of the extra quality from Enhance and Ashes of the Stars, Elemental weakness actually lowers fire resist by more than flammability does, because elemental weakness's quality is effective curse. Over here, just Flame Dash, Culling Strike, and Infernal Cry, and as I mentioned earlier, I have Call to Arms on a relic, so this Infernal Cry is instant. This Infernal Cry is just for the covers enemy in Ash. That's it. It's not used for anything else. It is just used to cover the enemy in Ash. Right here, we have the defensive setup. This is Divergent Cast when stunned. This is a very high chance to cast when you are either stunned or block a stunning hit. I find that this is more consistent than a cast when damage taken, as long as your character is not stun immune. And then Foul Molten Shell, Flame Golem just for extra damage, and Divergent Life Tap just to make sure that this doesn't cost any mana. This actually doesn't matter. I actually don't need Life Tap here. I actually just realized this. On most builds, I put Life Tap here because if you don't, and your cast when damage taken goes off, or your cast when stunned, whatever, and your it just basically stuns you and does nothing. But because I'm Eldritch Battery, I don't actually need Life Tap, and I didn't even think about that until right now. Anyway, that doesn't matter that much. This doesn't really matter because it's mainly a bossing build anyway. Over here, Divine Blessing, Enhance, Anomalous Zealotry. Anomalous Zealotry gives you more crit multi. So the aura setup is up here of Determination, Anger, Unbound Ailments, Summon Skitterbots. There's quite a few gem swaps you can do up here. While you're leveling or mapping, you can do like Determination, Grace, Defiance Banner if you want, and Skitterbots. In the intro video, you might have seen I had different amounts of reserved mana at times. That's because sometimes I'm using Herald of Ash instead of Determination. And this is actually the optimal damage. This is what I have set up in the POB, and then I have the other aura gems in the POB just as disabled gems, but you can switch them around if you want. So Herald of Ash is strictly for damage. Depending on what I'm fighting, I might switch to Determination, because some bosses are pretty quick and they'll just one-shot you before you even get a chance to do anything if you don't have some armor. And this build is quite squishy. This is strictly a boss killer. I don't like mapping on this build. I've done quite a bit of mapping, but when I map on this build, I run Cast on Death Portal. Also, when I map, I switch this Fork support in for Trap and Mind damage. You don't really need that much damage while you're mapping, and Fork just helps clear maps quite a bit faster. And then you might have noticed there's a few other things over here, and you might be wondering what these are for. Well, I mentioned Ilfabin's Trickery and Self-Cursing earlier, so let's go over how this works. So this is a Sanctified Relic with Hexmaster on it. It doesn't matter what modifiers are on the Sanctified Relic. All that matters is Hexmaster. You just buy Lycia's Invocation of Hexmaster, and you're done. This is Heartbound Loop, and this is Summon Raging Spirit. Heartbound Loop damages you whenever one of your minions dies, and Summon Raging Spirit is the shortest duration minion in the game. So the way to get the hexes on you for Self-Flagellation is you equip your Hexmaster Sanctified Relic, you equip a Heartbound Loop, and you just take off Nimis while you're doing this, and you equip Summon Raging Spirit. And what you do now, first I usually just set a few traps because the traps give life regen when they detonate because of the Saboteur Ascendancy. And then we just spam Summon Raging Spirit for a while, and they will start dying, and every time one dies, we'll get a random hex on us. And there's 9 hexes, so you just do this until you have 9 hexes on you. And now we're done. Heartbound Loop deals physical damage to you, so it will actually deal quite a bit more damage to you if you're not running Determination. Like if I turn off Determination and do the same thing, you'll see I take quite a bit more damage from these once they start detonating. Yeah, quite a bit more damage. And once this is all done, so Ilfabin's Trickery was bug fixed, so that you can't unequip it anymore to keep the curses on you, but you can unequip your Hexmaster Sanctified Relic, and you still have Hexmaster. These are still on you. And to be honest, I think this should be fixed still. I don't think the way they fixed Ilfabin's Trickery was the right way to do it. I just think it should not be able to self-curse. Anyway, and then you put your Nimis Ring back on, and you put your Zealotry back on, or whatever gem you swapped for Summon Raging Spirit. And now you are cursed with every hex, and because I'm using Aziri's Reflection, they don't do anything. These have no negative effect on me. What they do give me is, they each give me 20% increased damage, for a total of 180% increased damage. And when I show the POB, you'll see that this is about 16% more damage. It's quite strong. Is this the best thing you could put in the Helm slot? Probably not. But I wanted to show that this is still very strong. I've posted a couple videos on Ilfabin's Trickery talking about how strong this trick is, and a lot of the comments are kind of, oh, this is garbage. Why would you do this? Self-Flagellation doesn't do anything, and no, it's quite strong. Okay, so how does this build work? So you just put down as many traps as possible. My maximum traps right now is 19. I won't quite get up to 19. I think my max traps right now, or I think the maximum I can reach right now is 17. I just need more trap throwing speed to reach 19. And then once the boss spawns, You press your Divine Blessing, you press your Arcanist Brand, and you press all 5 flasks, and then the boss dies. And that's it. That's the whole build. There's nothing else to it. It's just a really strong boss killer. Playstyle-wise, this isn't really my kind of build. I don't really like this kind of build. I just had this idea and wanted to try it out and show you how it's done. I'll probably end up selling off this character's gear pretty soon because I'm basically done with it. I've shown that it works, and it's not really a playstyle that I like. So technically, because I'm not getting up to 19 traps here, I'm not quite reaching that billion damage mark that's in the POB, but with just a bit more trap throwing speed, it would be enough. Like maybe like 20% more trap throwing speed would be plenty. I'm not sure where you would get that from, but there's lots of places to get trap throwing speed. So let's take a quick look at the POB. So here's the POB. This is the exact same character. This is just imported the tree and the passives and items, and then I set the configuration modifiers for everything. You can see this character is only level 95, so that's another significant boost in power still, is there's still 5 more skill points that this character could get. So you might see the DPS over here is about 10 million. The average hit is about 3.4 million. So you might be wondering, where's that billion damage coming from? Well, since Fireball shotguns when it comes back, that means every single projectile is dealing damage. So the way to determine the front-loaded damage on a boss with a trap build is to multiply your average hit times your number of traps, your maximum number of traps, times your number of projectiles in this case, because they all hit, and then times 2 because of Sniper's Mark, because Sniper's Mark splits each projectile into 2. So the way we do that is we just plug it into the calculator here. We go 3,430,801.1 times max number of traps is 19 times number of projectiles is 8. And the way we get this is 1 for Fireball, plus 5 for Awakened GMP, and then plus 2 for Dying Sun. So 8 projectiles from each trap. So times 8. And then I mentioned times 2 for Sniper's Mark, times 2. We're at 1,042,000,000 front-loaded damage. Over 1 billion front-loaded damage. As I mentioned before, I'm not quite getting up to 19 traps yet, so you would need a bit more trap throwing speed to actually reach this number. If I show what I'm actually getting to, which is 17 traps, we go 3,430,801.1 times 17 times 8 times 2, 933 million. When you're looking at numbers this high, it just doesn't really matter. The boss is dead either way. This is actually the only character I've ever killed Uber Sirus on, and the fight was a joke. You saw it in the intro clip. It took a few seconds, and then the boss died. So if we go into configuration here, I'll just explain what all of these checkmarks are from. Power charges, frenzy charges. This comes from Trap Mastery and Sabo. I don't know if it's Ascendancy or Trap Mastery, but basically, whenever a trap gets detonated by an enemy, you have a chance to gain frenzy charge right here. Chance to gain frenzy charge when your trap is triggered by an enemy, and then power charge has the same thing right here. Chance to gain a power charge when your trap is triggered by an enemy. We have a lot of traps we're putting down, so we're pretty quickly going to stack up to max frenzy and power charges. And then once the boss spawns too, you just keep throwing down more traps. Even after they've started detonating, you don't really have anything else to do after you've cast your Divine Blessing and Arcanist Brand, so just keep throwing down more traps. So back to configuration tab. Do you have life tap? Sure, it doesn't matter. This is from the cast when stunned. Which I mentioned actually doesn't matter, so don't even worry about this. Do you have a flask active? So the reason I have all of my flasks active here is because this is a bosser and you start with all of your flasks full, you're just going to have them. It's not like we need to worry about flask uptime because the boss just dies instantly anyway. So yes, there's a flask active. Are you on consecrated ground? Yes, because of Bottled Faith. Number of traps triggered recently. This doesn't matter. This is just life regen. This is just you get life regen per number of trap triggered recently. Our skills targeting targeting the branded enemy. This doesn't matter. It automatically assumes they are anyway, even if you don't check this, so I don't know why this is even here. I guess this is probably for brand to damage skills like Stormbrand. Number of active brands, again, this doesn't matter. It already assumes you have one active. Is the enemy a boss? I have it set to Guardian/Pinnacle boss. And then over here, make sure you set all these hexes to 1. This is so that Self-Flagellation works. If I turn one of these off, my damage actually goes down a little bit. And that's because of Self-Flagellation, and I already went over how to curse yourself using Ilfamann's trickery. And then is the enemy burning, ignited, chilled, shocked? Yes to all of these. Burning because Fireball, it's a crit Fireball build, which causes ignite. The ignite itself doesn't really matter, but because it ignites, we get to use all those item mods that say added fire damage against burning enemies. Is the enemy chilled and shocked? Yes, because we use Skitterbots, which does both of these. It actually assumes this, even if you don't check these, it still assumes that they're chilled and shocked just because Skitterbots is enabled in the skills tab. Is the enemy exposed to fire? Yes, this is because of awakened fire penetration. If I go over here, Fireball, awakened fire penetration, chance to inflict fire exposure on hit. Back to configuration tab. Is the enemy on consecrated ground? Yes, because of Ball of Faith. Is the enemy unnerved? Yes, because of the gloves, which I showed how to craft. And is the enemy covered in ash? Yes, because of Infernal Cry. And then these custom modifiers, these are my Sanctified Relic right here. If I go back into the game real quick, this is my Sanctified Relic, so I just copied it into Path of Building. So you might not have the Sanctified Relic. It's a pretty strong one, but you don't need this or anything. And now that I'm looking at this, I actually did this incorrectly. I actually have 39% increased crit chance for spells. I'm not going to fix this right now because it doesn't really matter. But this would actually bring the damage up even higher. Like the average hit goes up to 3.447 instead of 3.430, which is not really a big difference. That's basically it for the POB. The only last thing I wanted to show in the skills tab is for the aura setup. You can see I left Determination in here. It's just not checked. You could also put like Grace Defiance Banner in here if you wanted to gem swap them. You just need some white sockets in whatever item you're going to put your auras in. I use my helmet normally. Again, you don't have to use the Elfabin's Trickery idea. There's probably better helmets you can put there, but I just wanted to show that it is pretty strong. And speaking of that, looking at the tree, if I go to here, which is Self-Flagellation, you can see this is giving me 16.5% more damage just from being hexed by every curse. I also wanted to show that Aziri's Reflection gives damage because of the curse effect. And you can see here, Aziri's Reflection, removing this would give you minus 16.2% total DPS. Actually quite strong. That is entirely just the curse effect. Aziri's Reflection doesn't have any other offensive stats. That's just from curse effect. Also in the skills tab, one more thing that I can show that is the biggest upgrade to this build, but as I mentioned, it costs half a mirror, is you could change this Empower to Awakened Empower and set it to level 5, and now you're doing even more damage. Awakened Empower costs half a mirror, so I'm not going to bother with it. And back in the items tab, couple things. There's some pretty easy upgrades here. This Scepter is good. It's not perfect. You can get a +2 Scepter here. You can get +1 all fire and +1 all spells. It's quite expensive, but that is sort of the next upgrade other than Awakened Empower. These gloves they have the mods that I want. They've got the Unnerved, they've got the crit chance, but that's basically it. You could get other stats here too, probably. Again, the boots are strictly defensive stats, so there's probably some better boots you could wear here. That's about it. The only thing I didn't cover here is this Watcher's Eye. It's just an Anger Zealotry Watcher's Eye. It's got 2 elemental resistance penetration mods on it. Very strong. You can see it's about 10.6% total DPS. Very strong Watcher's Eye. That's about it. That's the whole build. Like I said, I'm probably just going to sell off this character's gear and delete it pretty soon because I don't like this playstyle. But maybe you do. Maybe you like deleting bosses instantly. I like having more well-rounded builds that can kind of do everything. And this build, it can map, but it feels pretty miserable mapping. It's mainly just a boss killer. Anyway, let me know what you think. Let me know if this gives you any ideas for your own kind of build. Let me know what you would change on this, if you would change anything. And thanks for watching. Have a great day.